Perfect. Well, good afternoon and thank you for joining us today. I have the privilege to be with Sandy, and I'm pretty sure you guys all know Sandy and his parkour in this career of corrosion. Unfortunately, we couldn't be face to face with you today. We would have loved it, but here is a little bit of the message we want to transmit today. Sandy?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a pleasure to work with Monica and her team on this cost of corrosion study for Canada, and I'm looking forward to sharing these slides with you. Monica's going to lead the conversation, I guess, or lead the presentation, and then I have some comments on sustainability as part of the presentation.
Perfect. So let us dive right into it. Let me just share my screen here with you. Perfect. So here we are. We're going to present the results from the impact study in Canada. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to run through the agenda of today. So study what we did for the study, results and some case studies, some white papers, and we want to present to you. Then there is going to be the blog for sustainability, which is going to be run by Sandy, as he said before, and then next steps. So here we are. First of all, we want to do some acknowledgements to key sponsors, LMCI of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, and the NACE International Northern Area. I myself was the country manager, and we had a technical advisory panel. And then on that committee, there was Sandy, Pierre Krevelin, Nafis Ibrahimi, Rob Phillips, Jack White, Dennis Sadiri, and Elaine Bowman. So we all got together many times during this past year, and then we had several meetings, and that's what we're going to get together here and review. So how did we do that? We divided the study into 4 industry sectors. The primary industry sectors in Canada, energy, and that included a huge portion of the study, offshore, downstream, midstream, and upstream. We also included the manufacturing sector, the mining sector, and the transportation. So participants from all these sectors were included in the study. That meant that roughly 200 surveys were issued, and then many different decision makers, many different levels of technicity and leadership and managerial participated within this study. There were 87 self-assessment questions, and that's what were contained in the questionnaires that were sent out. There were questions in all of the study domains, and these domains come from the Impact Plus, which Elaine can certainly have a lot more insight to you if you have questions right now. Basically, we ask questions on policy, stakeholder, organization, accountability, resources, communication, CMP, which stands for Corrosion Management Practice Integration, continuous improvement, performance measures, and sustainability. So this is the first time that there is one study in corrosion, cost of corrosion, that includes sustainability as a standalone section of a study. So this is great. It provides us with a lot of insight. It gives us a lot of information on how are we doing in Canada on that section on sustainability. And Sandy is going to talk a little bit about that in a little second. The other thing that is important to understand is that we asked all those questions for all those domains throughout the life of an asset. So there were questions on the design phase. There were questions on the manufacturing and construction phase, operations and maintenance, and abandonment. So throughout the life cycle of an asset in all these domains. So here is some of the questions that we had. Does your organization have a corrosion management policy? Yes, no. Is it written? Is not written? What is it like? Is it for the whole life cycle of an asset? Is it for just a little bit of the organization? Or is it for the whole organization and the whole the whole life cycle of an asset? So those were things that the people that answered the survey were faced to think and then come back and answer. So here it is. How much is that? It's a lot of money, 51.9 billion US dollars. And that is approximately 3% of the Canada's GDP. This means there is 21% increased since the last study that was done in 2009, which is incredible because we keep being, bringing more technologies, being smarter, like having more training, having better tools, and we are still doing a lot of, spending a lot of money in corrosion. So how do we sit down in the overall, and then if we look at other countries, so it is no different than, for example, and I'm going to, for example, it's not different. We are not so far from like United States. So from you guys, it's around 2.7, and in our case, it's 2.9% of the GDP, and that's around the cost. However, we have it's in population kind of ways. We are a smaller country, so this is still a big number. The study can be broadly and is public, so you guys can access it in the website of AMPP. It's some of the things that we're going to show here are right there, is quotes right there from the study. So one of the ones that I like the most is this one: to broadly accept the corrosion management system model of governance. Business in Canada must change their corporate cultures. Such a shift necessitates a cultural change that must flow from the top to the bottom. It's just this is just a cultural thing. We need to understand that we are spending lots of money in corrosion, and that we can do better, and that if we do better, like the whole cycle, the whole everything within the organization, the environment, people, and everything is going to work in a better way. So where are we? Strengths. The areas that are a strength as a Canadian organizations or sectors are continuous improvement, corrosion management practice, integration, so CMPs, and organization. It seems that we are doing really good in those areas. Where we need to improve are areas of policy, performance measures, stakeholder integration, especially for the manufacturing and abandonment phases. So at the end of the life cycle, at the middle, at the end of the life cycle of the assets. So let's look at some of the case studies. This is one that I really like. It was in the city of Calgary. Something happened into one of the biggest pipelines, and it was a catastrophic failure. One of the pipes ruptured and then released 20 million liters. It flooded a bunch of streets, a bunch of houses. About 100,000 citizens were impacted. And then the cause of failure was investigated, and they said, okay, it's the local soil that contributed to have this. So they started a whole program of management the risk, and then studying the soil, and then perhaps looking at what other areas can be happening, can be having the same problem. And then in 2013, another failure happens, and so they started inspections to do identify anomalies with electromagnets. So right now, their program grew from having a very reactive, we don't know what to do, we have a failure, we impact a bunch of people, now we have to pay a bunch of money, to, okay, let's see which areas can be better. And then now on top of that, they have a risk prioritization, inspections and repairs and replacements. So it's more of a proactive than a reactive. And that had significantly decreased. They haven't had any major failures since 2013 because of this. This is another one. It's also a really good one. I like that one. It happens in the city of Vancouver. And so there is many, if you guys have the chance ever to be in that city, there is a lot of bridges. It's a lot of bridges and things like that. And they were built really in the 50s or prior to that. So they started doing an audit. And this happened after someone read the first impact study released in 2016 in the world, like how much costs corrosion in the world. And they thought, oh, maybe there is something here we can apply. And sure enough, they started doing the assessment of the bridges. And then they were looking at how the repairs were completed and how they were doing all these assessments. And they found out that there were missing a lot of training on the people, and they didn't know how to do the repairs or what was the final point of doing the repair. So what they found is there was coating, overcoating, and that didn't lead to a really like long-term solution. And it was too brittle, and it has a bunch of points of failure that happened. So now they have a new program that has a condition assessment. They did selected the coating specifically for the areas that have high humidity, they were close to the ocean or inside the forest. And on top of that, they did a lot of training to their personnel. So this was a really good outcome from someone that have read the previous study and said, there is something we could do better here. And indeed, they are doing it, and they have reported really brilliant results. This is the third case study, and I'm gonna allow Sandy to speak about this because that's a case study that he published along with Laura.
Okay, yes, this was an example of where something could have been done on the design phase that would have saved considerable millions of dollars, as you can see, during the operation and ongoing life of this particular project. The paper actually was published, as you can see the reference, right? You probably can't read it, but it's was published in 2017. But simply by adding a gas blanket to a boiler feed water tank would have prevented ingress of oxygen into the stream that was feeding the steam generators in this particular system. And that, because they didn't do that, they initially tried to combat the issue with chemicals, various chemicals, and that was starting to add up, but they continued to have failures, not necessarily as a fault of the chemistry, but basically because oxygen kept on getting into the system. Ultimately, they did install a gas blanket, and the system is working well. So it's a really good example with costs and everything in the paper. You can read in more detail of where something could have been done in design, and they just didn't want to spend the money at that time, or we're just used to building it in that particular way and nobody had challenged it. So that's basically the case study 3.
Thank you, Sandy. So that led us to the sustainability part. One thing that I want to add here before we go into the sustainability portion is that we have really limited time, and this being a video is difficult to convey the message, but everything is in the report. The report is publicly available. You can go and check it. There is a lot of great information. There is a lot of examples. And as you can see in here, what we're presenting to you, this is not only applying, this applies not only to plants and to production sites. This applies also to infrastructure and to municipalities and all those things like that. So that was my message before I get it back to Sandy again.
Okay, so I'll just spend a few minutes here on sustainability. And as Monica mentioned, we decided to add this sustainability aspect to our study because we thought if we're going out with questionnaire, why not ask about sustainability, which is linked very closely to corrosion management. And I just thought I would start off with a quick slide because sustainability means a lot of things to a lot of different people, including Mr. Wiley here with his non sequitur jokes. Okay, the next slide, please. So one of the best definitions that I think in our context is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that came from a UN report in 1987. Okay, so the next slide. Material sustainability. So as we sort of get more specific about material sustainability, it's really the way materials are sourced, processed, manufactured in products, and then maintained through the product life cycle and potentially, hopefully, redirected at their end of life. This is an example. You may be wondering what this picture is. Some clever people in Thailand are reusing old tires and basically cutting them up and reassembling them into a garbage container, and these are at the end of everybody's driveway in an area of Thailand, which I thought was a pretty good use of tires. But that's kind of the idea. We can redirect at the end of when the tread's out, well, we can still use those tires for other uses. And those will probably be there for some time. The next slide tells us about material stewardship, which is very closely related. And there's been some really excellent work, again, done within in the past by Chris Taylor and others. There's some good papers where Chris, for instance, and his co-authors introduced the concept of the 4 Ds, basically, the dematerialization, durability, design for multiple life cycles, and then diversion of waste streams through industrial symbiosis. These are all things that we can do that can ultimately improve material stewardship and looking after materials and essentially getting a better return on the investments that we've been making. So the next slide. What we're trying to do here is basically show that there is a pretty strong bond or linkage between stewardship and corrosion management. You're going to hear a lot today, or been talking a lot today, about corrosion management in this meeting and impact and so on. But I would also like to consider the material stewardship aspects of this. And that's basically where we can preserve and extend the lifetime of materials and cut waste. And there's a big impact on our day-to-day lives if we can do such a thing. The next slide shows a concept that you may well have heard of, which is the cradle-to-cradle concept, and that's the basis of circular economy thinking. On the left-hand side, you have what Mother Nature does. Essentially, when we produce things from plants, we make a product, we use them, but if we throw them out, hopefully in Mother Nature, what happens is they degrade, and they actually become nutrients and help grow plants again. And you can see there's a cycle there. So what we're doing is using that concept on the right-hand side from a technical perspective when manufacturing. If we're producing products, we want to use them. We're all used to recycling by now, but there's also a lot of thinking that can be done back at the production side or the design side that can allow for proper disassembly, and then they can be essentially a technical nutrient to be produce more product. So the next slide shows you a really great example of how this can work in industry. This is from the Kalundborg work or industrial area in Europe, where you can see there's multiple plants here. There's what, 4, 8, 13 plants. And essentially, without getting into too much detail, you can see the whole idea here is that what used to be a waste stream from one plant can be used potentially as a feed stream to another plant. And by basically cooperation within all these different industries, there can be a net impact in terms of reuse and better use of materials. Again, this has been written up quite well in some of our publications within NACE, as well as other conferences and so on. So the last slide I've got on sustainability is really just a quick snapshot. As you know, from the study, we asked a number of questions, and so we've reported how the different Canadian businesses are actually doing from a sustainability perspective. There's a lot more work that can be done here, but again, we looked at material sustainability across all the different life cycle phases, and with an idea of identifying gaps or where improvement can be made. So hopefully that gives you an idea how sustainability can work together with corrosion management. And I'll hand it back to Monica.
Thank you, Sandy. We are really at the end of this short video. And really what we wanted to conclude is, as you have seen from the examples we have shown you, from everything that Sandy and myself have really had shared with you here, is there is an unmitigated corrosion costs a lot of money and it's substantial versus the GDP. So we could be using that money for better things, very useless, than spending it trying to fix things that we know how to fix really. Proactive mitigation requires flexible corrosion management programs. It needs to be adaptable. I think during the last 2 years, nothing else has been shown us as a human race than being flexible and adaptable with all the situation we have lived. This is no different. It needs to be flexible, adaptable. It requires to have systems and programs that are integrated. Technology and science are not limiting factors, and this continues to be the case. As I said before, we have smart people, we have great technologies, we know how we should be doing things. So really the key factor in here is why we are not doing it and what is that cultural thing that need to be shifted so we can get better at doing what we are supposed to be doing. There are many return on investment models that can be used because let's face it, we corrosion people, technical people, we get very, very excited and we like to talk about, our corrosion under insulation and that MIC and these bacteria and but then when we get to present this to people that really want to take decisions, we need to talk in terms of money and how much that is going to cost. And this is what the impact is trying to give us as a tool. We have a tool right now that allows us to speak in the language that the decision makers are going to listen. So this is a great tool we have right now in hands. And then basically for Canada and Canadian organizations, we need more robust sustainability policies and strategies in all organizations, and that is throughout the life cycle of the assets. So again, cultural, we are getting in there. We need to do a little bit more, and that is why we have better tools that are now at our disposal, so we can apply them and then get to them in a better way. So that's all for today. The question that we want to ask you is, how can we help you with the goals for this particular study? And since we are not in person right there, and there is no probably you guys have questions, and then you have a bunch of comments in your head, you can reach out. This is my contact information, and then if I don't have the answer, I will direct you to the person that will have the answer for you. So feel free to reach out anytime. So at this point, I think we thank you very much for your time and for being here, and hopefully this was informative. And again, you can access this information publicly. You can just go to the AMPP website and then get the report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.